there's an adventure on every map. So it doesn't really matter what map you've got. There's just untold sort of adventures awaiting within that map, wherever the map is. And so maps, I think, for me are really essential things, because they are kind of the passport really to adventure. Adventure racing is pretty feral, and a lot of modern or normal rules don't apply to adventure races. I just basically stood at the buffet and just started eating. I was just picking up food and eating it.
Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a registered dietitian and running coach based in New York City. My goal for this podcast, aside from having fun, of course, is to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all style of eating. Rather, there are many different pathways towards individualized health and sports performance. I explore this in my athlete nutrition profiles, as well as in interviews with fellow dietitians on their areas of expertise. Today's guest is a legend in the sport of adventure racing, having won more events with his team than any other in the history of the sport. I'm of course speaking of New Zealand native Nathan Avae. His most recent win was at the world's toughest race, Eco Challenge Fiji, which my husband and I binged on Amazon Prime over the summer. The documentary has been out long enough that hopefully I haven't spoiled the ending for you, but if you haven't watched the series yet, please hit pause and go watch it right now, and come back to this episode afterwards. Nathan is an all-around incredible athlete and leader. He has been a full-time or semi-professional athlete for over 20 years and has accomplished many impressive athletic feats, including captaining the New Zealand adventure racing team to 6 world championship victories. But it's important to note that he wears many hats. He has 3 teenage kids, he runs several businesses, including organizing and directing sporting events. He is a professional outdoor consultant, and his career background is in outdoor education and adventure tourism. He is 48 years old and still crushing it along with his teammates. This is another long episode, just be warned. He has such an interesting story to tell, so much incredible advice to share from his decades of experience in the sport. And of course, I had a billion questions all about adventure racing and nutrition. So I hope you enjoy this episode, all 2+ hours of it. So without further ado, please welcome Nathan Avae to the show. Nathan, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for making contact. It's always fun to chat about these sort of things.
Yeah, so you just got back from an early morning run over there in New Zealand. Did you eat breakfast already? I know it's morning your time.
I have had a small amount of breakfast when I got home from my run, but I reckon after this I'll be due for another round.
What'd you eat?
A very small bowl of cereal so far.
Okay.
My kids had just been through the kitchen on their way, basically before they went to school. So we did have some fresh strawberries in the cupboard yesterday, but I noticed they were all gone this morning.
Oh man, and you have 3 teenage kids, right? So I imagine food just goes in and out of your house.
It does. Yep. No, it does go through pretty quick. And right now there's actually 5. There's a couple of friends staying here, so there was 5 teenagers for breakfast.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I think I could be grateful that I had any food at all.
Yeah, for sure. So now that some of the Eco Challenge buzz has died down and you've at least partially recovered from your podcast fatigue, I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to share your whole athletic and nutrition story today and to really dive into the amazing sport of adventure racing, which I know not everybody knows about, but it certainly is becoming a bit more mainstream now that Amazon released, the world's toughest race, Eco Challenge Fiji, which is a great thing, especially for people like you who, you really are kind of an ambassador of the sport and such a legend of the sport. But for me, this podcast is, of course, about eating for endurance, and adventure racing, I think you could really argue, is the epitome of endurance sport. For any of my listeners who aren't familiar with adventure racing, it's a team sport. And teams are typically racing for up to a week. They're engaging in many different types of sports. You don't even always know what you're doing all the time ahead of time. And, you don't have much time to sleep or rest. So it is obviously very taxing on the body. Nutrition is always important to successful sports performance. But I think the sheer volume and logistics of nutrition planning and adventure racing just puts sports nutrition considerations on a completely different level. So we're definitely going to get into all that today, and how you and your teammates have just absolutely dominated the sport for so long. But first, I want to dig into your nutrition roots. So, what was the food scene in your house growing up in New Zealand? Maybe you can kind of just paint the picture and share with me like what you remember about food growing up.
Sure. So I essentially I was born in 1972. So I guess my childhood was really through the 1970s and 80s, and I think back then, and I guess it was the same in the States. This wasn't the same level of processed food as there is around now. So my memory of growing up was my parents used to grow a lot of their own vegetables. So a large part of the vegetables that we ate were essentially grown in our yard. And I think around then too, New Zealand's always been a producer of meat, mainly beef and lamb. And then obviously there's quite a lot of seafood here as well, just being an island. And so my memory of growing up, for the first really until I was a young adult, was pretty basic food. Like in New Zealand, the phrase they kind of term for the olden day, well, it's not really olden day, but the food of that time was sort of meat and 3 veg. And that was a pretty standard meal for Kiwi families, is that you had meat of some sort, a portion of meat, and 3 different vegetables, and that was really what was on your plate. And that would be very much the house I grew up in. There's a lot of dairy here as well. So milk was kind of, we drank a lot of milk and cheese and things. But there just wasn't, I guess, the convenience food like there is today. So it was pretty. I sort of think back then that our diet was, I consider it to be fairly healthy. And good quality sort of food, and not a huge amount of treats. Like my mother and my nana, my grandmother, used to do quite a lot of home baking. So, if we were eating cakes and cookies and things, there was stuff that was produced, baked at home. Even bread, was quite often baked at home. So that's quite big changes. So I think our food was that was pretty much what I grew up on.
That's awesome. And you're, of course, half Samoan. Is there anything does your Samoan heritage contribute at all to the types of foods you grew up eating, or any, like, your approach to food nutrition now?
Yeah, definitely does. Because maybe not so much my approach to nutrition, but certainly in the foods that we eat. So interestingly, after World War II, and I can't actually remember the exact kind of reasoning behind it, but in the Pacific Islands, I think a lot of it was sort of to do with sort of global strategy, but a lot of countries started sort of forming colonies in the Pacific Islands. So where my father's from, Samoa, America actually essentially purchased one of the Northern Island groups, which is now fairly basically named called American Samoa. So that's actually part of the United States. And the Chinese actually sort of moved into Western Samoa, which is kind of an independent country. So I didn't actually know it at the time. When I grew up, I actually grew up eating a lot of food that I thought was Samoan food, but it's actually very Chinese influence. So in Samoa, there's a lot of rice, there's a lot of stir fry, there's a lot of noodle dishes, and there's a lot of spice used. And as a kid, I just thought that was because my father would make this food. And I just thought, oh, that's traditional Samoan food, but it's not at all. It was the Chinese kind of brought their food and blended it with, what was already naturally in Samoa, and created this kind of slightly unique blend of sort of Asian Pacific kind of food. So I guess how that's changed my eating now is that I grew up eating quite a lot of spicy food. So I've always enjoyed, strong flavors and that Asian style kind of spice.
Oh, okay. And do you consider yourself to have a strong stomach? Because I know with exercise, sometimes really strong spice doesn't always sit well, but maybe it doesn't bother you.
No, it doesn't bother me. No, I do consider myself to have pretty strong stomach in that regard. Like even globally around the world, I'm pretty resilient to, I seem to be able to just pick up eating what the locals are eating and have almost never had any problems with that.
That is very, very awesome. That's like almost a superpower, I feel like, as an athlete traveling all over the world with God knows what going on in the food. No, that is awesome. I'm sure that's helped your success to some degree. So you mentioned on other podcasts that you were active and adventurous from a very young age, and I do think growing up in New Zealand and especially on the South Island, which I've heard you speak about, is just being, just having this kind of culture of physical activity and exploration, adventure, all that stuff. And there's so many places to explore. But I mean, was it common to be engaging in all these different types of sports from a very young age as you did, or did you just have a particularly strong passion for the outdoors, would you say?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't common when I grew up. Like a lot of those sports, a lot of adventure sport in the sort of early 90s or late 80s, early 90s was quite, I wouldn't say elitist, but it was pretty difficult to know how to actually get involved in those things. There wasn't the pathways that are available now.
Mm-hmm.
And just finding out about that stuff, I mean, obviously now it's so easy to kind of do some research, 5 minutes online, and you can probably find out if there's a local club for just about anything that you might be interested in. But back then it was almost quite sort of secretive, trying to find out how you go rock climbing or how you go whitewater kayaking or how you do these different things. So I sort of had an interest in it. Like I as a teenager, I definitely developed an interest in sort of endurance, and I guess I always have had, looking back, I've always had a very adventurous kind of spirit. Like I always wanted to explore things, and so that's essentially New Zealand is very well set up for that, but it wasn't easy at that time. Like certainly now it is, but back then, and I think also the family I came from, my family we sort of recreated in the outdoors, but not kind of the stuff that I wanted to do.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to do that what I perceived to be the fairly extreme stuff. Like I was aware that people climbed mountains, and traveled across glaciers and kayaked off waterfalls and things like that. But I just didn't really know how you did that stuff or how you got involved or where you learned those things. I had interest in it. I'd sort of pick up an adventure magazine and be quite amazed about, what some people were sort of getting up to in their spare time.
What's your earliest memory in terms of like, oh, I want to do that? Like, was it picking up that magazine or was it something else?
There's definitely the adventure magazine was quite a source of inspiration for me, because it was an easy way of just finding out about what was actually happening within the country. It was called the New Zealand Adventure Magazine. It's still around today, actually. But I think probably one moment that I definitely remember quite clearly is I was hiking with some friends. We just did a weekend hiking trip, and we were probably about a day. But we were a day's hiking on a particular trail in a national park. And we got up in the morning and we were sort of just having breakfast, and we were basically camping right next to the trail. And then, to our surprise, about 50 or 60 trail runners ran past, and there was a trail running event on that we had no idea that it was on, or that that even existed. And when I got out from that trip, I kind of asked around and tried to find out more about what those people were doing, because that interested me. Like I thought, well, that looks pretty cool. And it turns out they were actually doing a mountain triathlon. So they were running through the mountains, and then they were going to be kayaking across a lake, and then biking back over some hills back to where they sort of started from. And once I found that out, I was like, oh, I want to do that. That's something I'd like to do. And so around that time, there was quite a few quite influential things that all sort of happened in a short period of time that kind of set me on the pathway, I guess, that I've been on ever since.
how old were you then when you went on that camping trip with your friends?
I would have been 16, I think, 16, maybe 17.
Okay. And this was around the time that, and again, I've heard you speak about this or read it somewhere else, that I guess you kind of hit a little bit of a rough patch as a teenager. You were smoking or doing drugs or something along those lines. And I don't know if your parents put you in this program or what kind of happened there. Maybe you can speak to that. But you got put in an outdoor program for at-risk youth. But the silver lining there is that it really put you on this trajectory to becoming the incredible venture racer and outdoorsman that you are today. So maybe you can share a little bit about this program, how long it was. Like, I'm not sure if what you described just now was kind of after you entered this program or kind of what happened there.
Yeah, it was all around the same time. So that's right. So as a teenager, and this is, I didn't really know it at the time, but I've always just had that kind of risk-taking, adventurous exploration kind of interest or spirit. And when I was younger teenager, me and my friend group, we just got up to mischief, and it was all pretty harmless stuff, really. But we were drinking, way too much for our age, and just smoking marijuana and just getting up to mischief. But we did that because it was exciting, and we knew we weren't allowed to be doing that, and with that there was the whole just that, I guess that whole thing, the whole excitement and adventure of hiding something you're not allowed. We didn't want to be caught doing these things, and we had to source this stuff, and that often led to not sourcing it in legal ways and things. So we got into a bit of mischief, and then I basically got offered a choice as a 16-year-old. We actually did start to get in some trouble, like we were getting older, and it was becoming a little bit less harmless what we were doing. And I essentially just got offered. I was part of a group of boys that basically we said, look, you guys, we were identified as at-risk youth. What we were doing wasn't really that helpful. wasn't helpful to society. And
sure.
We just got offered a choice, really, and one of the options for us to do was to go and do this outdoor program, which from memory was 12 weeks, and the alternative to that was basically go and just do community work for 12 weeks. And so for me, I think for some of the boys at the time, going and doing a 12-week outdoor program was kind of seen as something that they really didn't want to do. But for me, it was like, well, that'd be amazing, because I already did. Yeah. I already had an interest in doing that stuff, so it was kind of like, well, this is easy for me. I'll definitely go and do this program. And it was during that program that I basically stopped drinking alcohol on that course and started being a lot more focused about what I wanted to do. Like, fitness was a big part of the program. Like, we would run just about every day, and obviously they encouraged healthy living, no drug alcohol abuse, etc. I just excelled at that course. It was just perfect timing for me. I guess I was smart enough to know that the path I was on wasn't really my future. It was just a bit of fun, really, until I could sort of figure something else out. And once I got onto that program, the tutors were awesome, and sort of I'd left school at that point, and I still had 1 year of my school education to go. And so they encouraged me to go back to school and study for college, and just kind of sort myself out, really. They're like, look, and that's pretty much what happened. I sort of completed the course and sort of, I guess, got into the outdoors in a big way, and went back and finished my education, and then actually did go on to college. And by then I was doing so much sport that that any idle time I had was spent. I mean, I guess my wife will say, and this has been said over and over again throughout my life, that I do have somewhat of a sort of addictive personality. I don't have a lot of moderation in the things I do. So when I choose to do something, it's it is at a fairly intense level, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, wouldn't you say that's kind of a running theme throughout many of these types of sports, not just adventure racing, but you look at ultra running or Ironman. I mean, any of these things. I mean, these are intense situations, and particularly, I mean, adventure racing, and we'll talk about some of the extreme situations you can get into. And you think about all of the recovering, alcoholics or drug addicts, or, I mean, you clearly were, I think what it sounds like what you're explaining is kind of like, I mean, not necessarily a typical teenage stuff, but to some level, right? I mean, I think all of us as teenagers got up to no good at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are obviously people who had like really serious addictions later in life, and they, end up sobering up and getting into another pretty extreme thing. But yeah, I feel like you have to have that streak in you to some degree. Otherwise, you would be scared to do some of the things that you kind of dive right into, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not even sure if it's so much fear or being scared of it. I think what it lends, I think that I think what that personality lends itself to is to be able to endure, not normal levels of things. So if you're kind of used to operating at one end of a continuum or a spectrum at whatever you do, you kind of need that in some ways to succeed, I think, at any endurance sport, or certainly an ultra endurance sport like event racing and some of the other ones you mentioned, because you do have to go and train, kind of crazy hours at some point, and just be able to kind of go and do stuff that most people would just find really quite odd, but you find that normal. So yeah, I guess that's
for sure. Let's explore nutrition at this time of your life, because you kind of downplay a little bit, or maybe you don't downplay, but we haven't really gotten into it so much. But when you're 16, 17, it's not like you were just like, oh yeah, we did some running every day, we did a few miles here and there. Like, you ran your first marathon when you were 16, and you even ran, like, not in your first attempt, but I don't know if it was like your second or third, but like at 16 you ran a 3-hour marathon. Is that right?
Yeah, only just, but yes.
Only just. You know what? You could have run, 1 second below that, it counts. I mean, you're 16, you're running fast, you're training hard, you did a triathlon at 17. This is like pretty serious training. And as you mentioned, you were very focused, and clearly you channeled all of that energy from all the other stuff you were doing into some pretty amazing athletic feats. So, like, what did your nutrition look like at this time? Did it change at all? Were you living at this program, by the way, or was it kind of like a part-time thing and you went back home?
When we were on the course, we were it was residential, so we lived on site for the 12 weeks. And where the outdoor centre is, it's actually not far from where I live now, actually.
Oh, neat.
But no, we lived on site, and yeah, I guess that was because there was some fairly strict rules around what we couldn't do, and yeah, and then yeah. So I think pretty much when I left school when I was 16 and left home when I was 16, but then I had a year off. So the year where I was kind of 16, 17 years old, I was largely out of home trying to do my own thing. But then after that program, the tutors sort of strongly encouraged me to go back and finish my education. So by 18, I was actually I was living back with my parents and went back and finished school. So yeah, I guess nutritionally around that time, it was still pretty much what I sort of mentioned before about, just that kind of normal at that time, just the sort of Kiwi meat and three veg. And I think back then junk food, I mean, it wasn't the fast food like there is now. I mean, our only fast food at that time was it's still popular in New Zealand, just fish and chips, which is just battered and fried fish and fries and chips. And I remember back then that there was just starting to be kind of health awareness raised around people not eating too much fat, but sugar wasn't really an issue. Like, I don't think back then that our sugar intake was anything problematic. Like, we weren't I guess the other thing is we didn't have much money either. Like as a kid, I never really remembered having sort of money in my pocket that often. So, you sort of went back home to eat, and we weren't sort of buying up, massive bottles of soda pop and things like you see kids doing these days.
Sure. But what about specifically to the training though? You're training for the marathon. Like these are long efforts. You're doing long runs, I imagine. You're doing, training for the triathlon. Were you taking anything with you on the run? Were you, doing anything differently there? I mean, you must have been eating more. I imagine you must have been hungrier as you became more active, no?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So and that's how I'd probably sum it up, is that I just was eating more.
Sure.
Not necessarily anything different, but I know my mother was saying that, when I moved back home and I was eating more, like it was just, that was a significant thing. Like, so mealtime, she would just sort of cook more of the same thing, knowing that I was just basically burning through a lot more calories. And I think I probably just started snacking a bit more too, just sort of during the afternoons and things, just coming home and just having a small meal before I'd sort of head out training and things. But in terms of sports nutrition and things, like, no, I was learning a lot. Like I really didn't know much, and the day I broke 3 hours in the marathon, like had I known probably had I known what I know now about sports nutrition, I probably would have run a sub 240 that day quite comfortably. Like I think I was fit enough and fast enough for that, but I just didn't really know anything about I just sort of got up that morning and had a small amount of breakfast and then just kind of went and ran the marathon, and sort of wondered why towards the end I started to struggle.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
Yeah, that was.
I think it's like sign of the times too. But also, you were 16, so it's not like you were necessarily working with coaches or any of that kind of thing. You just kind of went out and did it. Although it sounds like you had some good mentors at the program that you were at, and they were doing similar things. But okay, interesting. So let's move on to kind of the next chapter of your life, mountain biking, which is, I guess, your first really truly competitive sport. Were you a professional mountain biker? Would you consider yourself that? I mean, I think you were, right?
Yeah, semi-professional, I think, towards the end of my career. So I was in the New Zealand team for 5 years and qualified for the Olympics in '96 and traveled around. On the World Cup and things, but not by today's standards, not professional, but semi-professional would be. Yeah.
But still, you were quite competitive. And at this time, I mean, as you were learning more and doing more things, and obviously biking is like a whole different thing to running. Any kind of significant learning moments, nutrition, any changes, or again, was it just more of the same? Were you still living at home at the time? Did you have you're off on your own? What was going on here?
Sure. So the first year of mountain bike racing, I was still living at home, just finishing my school education. And then I was away for a couple of years studying at university or at college. And that was a lot around my mountain biking career. There was a lot of nutritional changes, or exploration, I guess is probably a better word. So, and it was during mountain biking that really in New Zealand, these things started to show up. Like during my mountain bike career, it was the first time in New Zealand anyway, that we got kind of gels, like sports gels. And, I remember when these things first came out and, all the riders talking about, you take one of these during the race and, you turn you into a superhero type thing. And the first power bars came out. I don't know if you ever can remember those or had those, but
I remember power bars.
They almost took probably 1,000 calories to try and chew the thing.
Seriously.
Unless they were hot. So we started experimenting, and it was very competitive. Mountain biking at that level has always been competitive, but it was probably more competitive now than it was then. But we were always looking for an edge, and so by now I'm sort of in my 20s, and I was studying physical education at Otago University, and I was living in a flat with a couple of other mountain bike racers and cyclists, and we were doing a lot of things to try and figure out how we could go faster on our bikes. And so, there was the stuff coming out around energy gels, power bars, electrolyte sort of, there's supplements, there's all this stuff was starting to kind of come up. This is in the early 90s now. And because we were phys ed students, we were also interested in a number of different things. So we were, in our flat, we were actually trialing quite a few different sort of, I guess, diets or eating patterns. And we tried a number of different things over a few years. And just kind of experimenting really to see what would make us go faster or have more energy or train better and things. So your nutrition started to become something we took a big interest in around that time.
Yeah. What was like pretty helpful, or what was successful, and what was like a total fail in terms of nutrition of what you tried?
I think things that were kind of, we probably,
or was it in between?
Yeah, we probably never did something long enough to give it a fair trial. But I don't know if you've ever heard of a book called, I'm pretty sure it was called Strategies of Champions. And it was essentially a reversal eating kind of plan. So, and there was, in any of these books, as I'm sure you know, any of these sort of nutrition books you pick up, they'll quote some super athlete that's on this program.
Sure.
And, is achieving these great things. So as young, impressionable cyclists and mountain bikers, all we needed to know was there was one athlete somewhere in the world that was succeeding on this program, and that was good enough for us. So, but this reversal eating program was basically essentially exactly what it says. It was basically get up in the morning, have your dinner, and then at lunchtime have lunch.
I was like, what does that mean, reversal eating?
Yeah.
Okay,
and then
got it.
And then at bedtime have you kind of, your breakfast and then go to sleep. And the theory behind it kind of makes sense when you're kind of 18 years old and sort of a sponge for information, because it basically says, you want your biggest meal when you're going to be burning all that energy. So you should get up and have your meat and 3 veggies and, have a big steak and vegetables for breakfast or something. And then that'll give you the energy for the day. So you go out training, and then obviously lunch is lunch. And then at nighttime, when you're going to sleep, well, you don't really need much food when you're sleeping. So you might as well just have a little bit of cereal and a bit of fruit and yogurt, and then, go to bed on a light stomach. So we tried that for a while, but no, we didn't. None of us thought that was particularly good. And then we tried. Then there was a book that came out that was called Fit for Life, and we read that, and that was kind of the opposite. That was basically like pretty much fast until midday, have some fruit, but and at the time it was also it was promoting vegetarianism, and we were keen for anything. Like we were like, well, if it's going to make us go faster, we'll try it. And we actually found that worked pretty well, that system, where we just basically eat as much fruit as you want until midday, and we would often train in the mornings, and then you pretty much just eat fairly healthy vegetarian diet for the rest of the day. And obviously they promote all the other good things like, avoid preserved food and avoid fatty foods and drink plenty of water.
Which we now know, that was like so 90s.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually worked pretty well. But I did that for quite a while until I went and got a dental checkup, and my dentist was like, "Man, your teeth have really deteriorated lately." And he's like, well, change your diet. And I was going, I only eat fruit in the mornings until sort of midday and stuff. He goes, oh, that's too hard. And then like most of those things, they kind of just fad out of it. And then we also tried being vegan for a while, just no vegetarian and no, obviously no dairy and stuff. And to be fair, to be honest, I actually raced really well for about one season as a vegan, but I think I was too young and not managing my diet well enough, and then I just found that I just got really fatigued at the end of the season, and it didn't seem to be working for me. But I wouldn't say I was doing it well.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think that especially when you're trying to be like a really high performing athlete, like you really are looking everywhere for an edge of some kind. But now we know it's not like the fad diets and all of that. It's like really kind of just like boring, sensible advice and making sure you're eating enough and timing consistently. I mean, there's so many things to it, obviously, but interesting. And so, okay, so you qualified for the Olympics in 1996. And you won your very first adventure race in 1999. Walk me through kind of what happened between 1996 and 1999. I mean, you clearly are a jack of all trades when it comes to sport, but what specifically motivated you to leave mountain biking behind and kind of pursue the multi-sport events?
Yeah, so I guess a bit of a timeline is right from obviously I was really into the outdoor stuff, so kayaking, climbing, mountaineering, and pretty much anything adventure I was keen on. And in the competition side of stuff, I started running and ran a few marathons. But as a 16-year-old, marathons were pretty boring. And and then mountain biking was so exciting because the technology was moving instantly. That was such an exciting period to be a mountain biker. And mountain biking for me as a teenager was exciting. Obviously it was, you're doing jumps and skids and it's just full of gadgets. So it was the perfect sport for kind of young people. And so I was like, I'm not going to run any more marathons. I'm going to go and sort of do some mountain biking. It's way more interesting. And but I was also in New Zealand. We have a sport here called multi-sport, which is basically triathlon, but instead of swim, bike, run, it's kayak, bike, run, and they're mountain-based races rather than urban environments. And we have a really big race here called the Coast to Coast, which goes from one side of the South Island to the other, and that race is a real big deal. It's it's almost an institution in New Zealand. Like if you haven't done the Coast to Coast, you kind of go, that's strange. Why not? And I sort of went and did that around that period of when I sort of did this course, and I ran the marathons, and I was sort of getting into mountain biking, and I went and did the Coast to Coast as well. It was just part of all that sort of, for me, just sort of finding out, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And I did pretty well. I did quite well on my first Coast to Coast, but I decided that it'll be something that I come back to. Like I thought, the Coast to Coast, like endurance triathlons or multi-sport races like that, they're pretty big events, and I was just way more interested in mountain biking as a sole focus. So what happened with mountain biking is I raced mountain bikes pretty competitively from 1990 to 96, and then it's quite a long story, but the short story is that right at the last minute, like literally a couple of months before the Olympics, I was actually in the States at the time training for the Olympics. They changed the criteria on mountain biking. It was the first year mountain biking was at the Olympics. It was in Atlanta, and rather than being a demonstration sport, they changed it to being a full medal sport because mountain biking was just growing so fast, and America was the home of mountain biking. But what that meant is that because it was a full medal sport, that mountain biking then, rather than just being a sort of a separate sport of its own, it came under a code of cycling. So most of the international teams had already set their teams for the Olympics. And so the only way you could take mountain bikers was by dropping some of your cyclists out, your road cyclists or track cyclists. So what happened in New Zealand was they were like, well, we don't want to do that. We've got all our road and track cyclists all training for the Olympics. It's not really fair on them to tell them that we have to reduce the team to make room for the mountain bikers. So basically, there was myself and the other guy. We were the top two New Zealand mountain bikers at the time. They essentially just sent us a fax. It was back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
We were training in Boulder, in Colorado, getting ready for the Olympics, and the fax came through and said, "Sorry guys, come home.
What a bummer!
You're not riding the Olympics." And our female mountain biker who qualified, she got to race the Olympics because she was in the New Zealand road cycling team as well. But that's the only reason she got to race the mountain bike race. So I guess I was really disappointed with that. And so John and I, the number one rider at the time in New Zealand, he was number one, I was number two. We were so gutted that we both quit mountain biking.
Wow.
And for me, he later, I think he took a year off and then got back into mountain biking. But for me, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go and do other stuff. I want to go and do the coast to coast, and I want to go and do more adventure stuff. And for me, it was just like, oh, well, I gave it a go, sort of achieved that goal of getting to the Olympics, but didn't get to race. But I'm not going to wait another 4 years. I'm going to go and do some other stuff. So yeah, I basically went back to multisport. I went back doing coast to coast and things for a few years, and then my goal was to basically, get into adventure racing.
Yeah, awesome. And so now we're getting into kind of your long and ongoing adventure racing career, which I mean, you're still in the peak of it. I mean, you just won this huge thing. So, and you're still doing stuff. So, and you're 48 now, right? Is that right? 48, 49?
I am 48, and I do not feel like I'm at peak of. I think my team is at the peak of things, but me as an individual, I couldn't claim that anymore.
Well, but you add so much more than just the physical aspects of things, right? I mean, your decades of experience. I mean, when did adventure racing even start? Like it didn't start that long before you entered it, right? Is that or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, it was 1989. But that's
the very first adventure race ever.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is in New Zealand. Yeah.
Wow. So New Zealand's like the home of adventure racing, and you pretty much like grew up with it, and you've been on that whole ride throughout the whole thing. But one of the things that I really want to talk about, and of course from your whole experience, but again, you're like the best person to talk to about this, given you've been in this sport for for almost 20 years now, over 20 years. But yeah, so I want to talk about like the general challenges and logistics of adventure racing, specifically when it comes to fueling, and just myself not being like I'm, superficially familiar with adventure racing, and of course I watch the Eco Challenge, and I've interviewed other adventure racers like Travis Macy and Marshall Ulrich was on the show as well. But so I know some things, but I really wanted to get into like the nitty gritty details because I just have a billion questions. Yeah. So first, prepping for these big multi-day, multi-sport events, especially the international ones. I mean, that must be such an ordeal in terms of just planning. And I mean, you have the training for it, obviously, but there are a lot of things you don't even know. Like you don't necessarily, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, please, but you don't necessarily know. You don't know the route always. You don't know it in advance. You don't know all of the sports. Like there are some core sports. What is it? Mountain biking and kayaking, trekking. But like you don't know all of the sports that are involved. And then, of course, from the nutritional standpoint, I mean, there's so much plan that goes into nutrition generally for any event that you do, but you're not sure how long it'll take. You're constantly wet in some of these cases. Like, I mean, I know it depends on where you are at, but you have to make sure all your stuff is really protected. Your gear is protected. It just seems like this huge, I don't know. I mean, clearly you're so experienced, it's not so daunting, but can you just talk us through some of the prep that goes into like the actual packing and planning, especially from the nutrition standpoint?
Yeah, I think it is kind of tricky in some ways, I guess, for me to, I mean, I can answer the question, but I can totally see that my answer is going to be very, very different to so many other people, because simply like you sort of alluded to, like I've been adventure racing now for 20 years, but added to that, like outside of adventure racing, what we do for recreation is essentially just forms of adventure racing itself. So certainly for me, getting prepared for a race now, and it is a fairly normal and fairly simple task. I mean, it's just a matter of sort of going through a checklist and making sure that we've got all the required things, really. And you learn from experience that you want to invest the time before you go somewhere and make sure that you've definitely got everything, because some countries we go to, if you're missing some gear, then that can be really quite difficult to get it wherever you may be. But so going, whenever we go to a race, we know what the disciplines are going to be, and the organisers will send us a gear list, which is usually about 4 or 5 pages long, and it says, like, this is the compulsory gear. This is what you need to bring, and it'll be set into zones. So it'll be like, this is what you need for hiking, this is what you need for mountaineering, for kayaking, for rafting, inline skating, horse trekking, caving, sailing, whatever it may be. So we have to source all that gear, and that is not that difficult if you know ahead of time what you need. Most of the time, collectively between my teammates, we have that equipment, but sometimes we have to go and buy specific gear. And then the next challenge is actually getting it to the country we're racing in. And so I guess in terms of the gear list, it's usually laid out pretty clearly for us what we need. It's probably more the stuff that we take that is not mandatory that is probably the more important stuff. So they're the things that, as a team and as athletes, we've gone, well, this is not on the gear list, but I'm racing without this. This is stuff that we definitely need to make sure we've got. So added, whatever climatic region we're racing in, like our team will kind of take some extra stuff, equipment or products that we know we'll need in this environment. And a lot of that would be nutritional things, especially in the heat, especially in a hot climate. So nutritionally is an interesting one, because the easiest place for us to race, as you can imagine, is in New Zealand. And, sure. And the reason, one of the things that's the easiest thing here for us is the fact that we can go into a supermarket a few days before the race and buy exactly what we want, because we know exactly what we want, right down to the type of brand of cookie that you want to eat. Whereas we can be very restricted sometimes on how much we can take on an airplane. And some races we go to, we can't take any food from New Zealand, or practically nothing.
Really?
No, because it'll just work out way too expensive. Like, it's just, there's no, there's...
You mean because of baggage limits, or why?
Yeah, baggage limits. And then...
Wow.
Yeah, so the like if we're flying, I've done some racing in Abu Dhabi, so you fly in there on Emirates or Emiratis, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and they are very strict with their baggage. So I think they allow 20 kilos per person, and then because they don't want people to take any more than that, the per kilo charge over that is just ridiculous. Just so basically people won't do it. I can't remember what it is, but it's like, $50 for a kilo above or whatever it is. So basically it means, take some food is going to cost you thousands of dollars for food. So what ends up happening is that we often, I'd say 50% of the time we race, we have to source the food that we're going to race with from the country we're in. We have to buy the food on location. And that can be really...
can I pause you 1 sec? Wait, but don't you maybe it's different for the international flights, but I always thought it would be like $50 for an extra bag, or are you guys just like maxing out all the extra bags already? Is that it was like on top of that, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, because
like you're just traveling with crazy amounts of stuff and your bikes and all your gear, I imagine. So I guess you have to prioritize gear over the food is what you're saying.
That's right. Dead right. So by the time we take, our paddling gear, so life jackets, helmets, paddles, mountain bike tools, spare tire, trekking gear, sleeping gear, tent. I mean, these are the essential items that we need. Like already we are over the limit. It does depend on where you're flying to, but I guess out of New Zealand, we don't have all that many options. And I guess, so it depends a bit on where we can go. Sometimes we're lucky, we can take more gear and we can just pay the extra bag, and that's fine. But sometimes we can't.
So your sponsors, I mean, these are sponsored things, right? Are your sponsors paying for these things, or you have to pay out of pocket?
Yeah, they will. Our sponsors do pay, but then they I think they're not going to pay. There is a limit to what they'll pay as well. So
they're not going to pay for your New Zealand cookies for like $1,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're going to go, look, sorry, but you're just going to have to eat some local food. And I think, to be honest, one of the reasons why our team has had long-term sponsors is we are very sensible with the money, our sponsorship dollar. Like, we make it go a long way, and we don't want to waste money either. It's just not who we are. So no, we just make do. If we think, I mean, we will take some things, small things, but nutrition-wise, if we know we're not going to. Electrolyte tablets, and possibly some gels, but or maybe some salt stick products, or like if we're racing in tropics in the heat, we'll make sure we take the stuff that we want for in the heat, and that is largely sort of electrolyte powders and tablets and pills and things, just kind of around that. And then just some vitamin C sachets sometimes and different things. It depends on where we're going and what we think we can get. And then these days, most of the time you can get most things you want, but but if you're used to like training on a very specific brand or brands of gels or things, I mean, again, what I mentioned earlier, it's a really great thing that you have a strong stomach. And I think in a sport like this, part of training is training yourself to have a huge flexibility with nutrition, because you just have to. And you can't, there's so many things you can't predict. What happens if you do bring stuff with you, but your bag gets lost or customs takes it away or whatever? Like, you can't rely on things happening as planned always. So I think it's largely to your benefit that you have this great flexibility with nutrition. But I think some of the things I was asking is like, if you're racing for up to 7 days or whatever it is, like just the sheer quantity of electrolyte powders and things that you need. I mean, it's a lot. Like, you're nonstop expending energy. I mean, obviously you're stopping to sleep here and there for, some hours, but you need a lot of stuff. So that was okay. So on the ground, you're getting there, you're going to a supermarket or a whatever is around kind of thing. And it's not like on the course they're typically providing water or food, or are they like some other race? Nothing. No, not
it's
normally.
all
normally.
Okay.
No.
Wow.
No, most of the time you're self-sufficient. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep.
So like for water, for instance, are you guys just bringing like filtration type stuff or pills or things like that? Or what are you doing for water then typically?
Yeah.
Or it depends.
Exactly that. Yeah. So we have, we've got pretty good water filters that we can add to our bladder hoses. And then we'll also use purification drops if we're concerned about the water. The filters we've got are pretty good, but if we're concerned about the water quality, we'll put in purification drops as well.
But now you mentioned Abu Dhabi, and I know you did like a 140-kilometer run or something along those lines there. Like, what do you do about water there? Are there water sources anywhere?
That is an exception. That they actually helicopter water out into the desert. So every 10 kilometers, we got resupplied 3 liters of water per person.
Okay, good. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I do not know how that worked. There must have been something.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you had to be pretty careful with that. That was barely. It was only just enough to get you from one water station to the next. Yeah.
Wow. In terms of gels, like any kind of favorite go-to sports nutrition products you use, whether it's gels or anything else. You mentioned salt stick. Any other things, bars, things like that you're like, if you are able to take them with you, or if you had to pick a favorite, anything in there?
To be honest, I think, one thing, and you sort of alluded to it, I think with our team, one thing we're really good at is actually being very adaptable. So we'll just kind of take whatever we're quite happy most of the time to take whatever we can source. Traditionally we've always kind of like goo gels. If we're going to use gels, the goo ones we've found pretty good. And but in New Zealand we've got a company called Pure that make gels, and we quite like the New Zealand ones because they got more fluid in them. So you don't have a lot of the gels. You have to kind of take the gel with water, but the pure ones we like because you can just take them on their own. They're quite good. But no, we're generally not that fussy about things. And then we've got some pretty good bars in New Zealand. We actually really love the few races we've done in the States. We've eaten a lot of Lara bars. They're pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Those are pretty good. Yeah. Gel that so you mentioned that pure gel that has more water in it. There's a I think it's a UK company called Science and Sport, and that also is kind of, I don't know if you've had that one before, but it's like a thinner gel. But I lived in London for a few years, and when I got into marathoning and kind of longer stuff, I too kind of gravitated more towards like the thinner gels than like the really thick ones. But cool. Yeah. How does, and maybe it doesn't, but how does your fueling differ, if at all, between your various sports when racing or when training?
How does the feeling? Sorry, what was the
fueling? Like, how does your nutrition differ? Like your nutrition strategies or the types of things you reach for? Again, because you're doing so many different sports.
Yes.
Like, how does it? Like, are you always trying to get a certain number of calories in per hour? Or are you just kind of like, how does that all work? You know, and change from sport to
Our team. Our team, I think, would be fair to say we don't apply a huge amount of science to kind of how we fuel ourselves during the races and probably training for that sense. Like I think a lot of it for us is just intuition and kind of experience. So how we go. So let's take Eco Challenge for example. So that race was a bit unique because it's not alone, but it's one of the fewer races where we don't actually know the order of the stages or kind of what's happening. But they sort of gave us the course from camp to camp, so we only ever really knew what was happening for the next kind of day or so, and then we'd sort of find out what we're going to be doing after that. But most races, we kind of get the whole course the night before the race or the day before the race, and we can plan a bit better. So, but essentially what our team does is that we kind of have a shopping list. So when we get on location, we know that we want to buy, 2 kilos of dried fruit, 2 kilos of salted nuts, 1 kilo of candy or whatever it is, certainly so many kilos of corn chips or whatever we decide we're going to kind of eat in that race or what we think we can buy. So we go and we actually even know, really, we sort of know pretty much by how much money we spend as well, that if we've got enough food. So we go and buy what we want, and then we've got to go, oh, yeah, that's about right. That's kind of, we should be spending sort of, roughly about 800 New Zealand dollars on our food shop. So we convert that and go, oh, yeah, that seems about right. And then what we do is we make up 12-hour, we spend sort of a half a day before the race making up 12-hour food bags. And so we generally know the race is going to be about 100 hours or 120 hours. So we'll make up sort of a whole lot of 12-hour ration packs, I guess you could say. And then once we get the course, we can then decide that, okay, this trek is the fastest time, they reckon, is 24 hours. So we go, oh, yeah, that's easy, 2 12-hour bags. And then they go, oh, this mountain bike ride is going to be, fastest time is going to be 18 hours. So we go, okay, that's 1 bag plus half a bag. So then we'll kind of empty half the contents out of one of the bags and then go, okay, that's my food for that mountain bike ride. And they might say this kayak stage, for example, was, 8 hours. So you might go, okay, well, I'll just take a 12-hour food bag for that. And that's fine. I'll just chuck it in the kayak. But added to that, when you're hiking in these races, that's the chance for you to eat kind of more difficult food. So, difficult as in just kind of the practicalities of eating something. So when you're hiking, it's very easy to be walking along with a meal, like a prepared meal and a spoon, and just basically spoon feeding yourself a meal or something, or you can be eating a bag of corn chips or whatever it is. When you're biking, obviously it's a bit more difficult. So, and then when you're kayaking, it's even more difficult to eat because you're paddling. So, so I guess how we sort of mitigate that is that for the kayaking stages, we actually try and take a lot of pre-prepared food. So if we've got the luxury, we'll take a lot of tier top cans of food, like cans of beans and cans of rice, or cans of, any sort of canned food is fair game, really. And then so before we go kayaking, what we'll try and do, cans of fruit are good. Before we get on the water, we'll try and eat as many cans as we can.
Oh my God. I'm just trying to imagine, like, visually what that looks like.
Yeah. It's not pretty.
Oh,
not
God.
pretty. And then and essentially what you're trying to do is have a meal so you don't have to eat for another 3 or 4 hours. So you go, right, I know I've just eaten all this food, so I'm pretty good for a few hours at least. And then you just keep paddling. And then if we've got time, we might make up, a lot of the food liquid replacement meals. I don't know if you get it in the States, but there's a product in New Zealand called Ensure.
Yep, we
and
have
you
that.
so you can either buy it in cans ready. So we'll often buy the pre-made ones, and there's chuck all them in the kayak. And they're actually pretty convenient. Like, you can stop paddling for 20 seconds and everyone can scull it, drink a couple of those cans real quick, and then you can carry on. Or we'll take the powder and make 3 liters of Ensure and have that accessible while you're paddling. So you're actually drinking that while you're paddling.
Uh-huh.
And then on the biking, that's the easiest food to eat while you're biking is obviously bars, gels, bananas, things that you can easily kind of handle with one hand while you're riding.
Yeah. What about whitewater rafting? Like, you can't really stop in that, and also with like your hands are full. Like, you can't use your hands, right? So how does it work, like, in whitewater rafting when?
Yeah,
there was like part of, Eco Challenge, I think you were like describing, like, oh, that was so much fun and not stressful at all. And of course, you like from my perspective as somebody who never has whitewater rafted in my life, like, I look at that and I'm like, that looks so scary and terrifying and dangerous. Like, what are you doing there?
Yeah, some of those things you like the whitewater rafting, for example, it's usually never that long. Like, you're not, despite what it may seem on the television, it's those stages are probably, they're probably generally only 2, 3 or 4 hours, maybe 6 hours maximum.
That's a long time. You have to eat and drink in that time.
Yeah, but if you eat quite a lot before you start the rafting, and you've got a couple of like sports bars in your pocket, it's if someone's hungry, it's no trouble just to stop paddling, quickly eat a bar, and then carry on paddling again. Or we may even, if it's a really long section, we may just take a bag of, like I said before, just of canned food, like whole meals. Mm-hmm. And we may actually all stop rafting for like 2 minutes, just pull over to the side of the river and then eat, have a decent meal. And our philosophy in our team is that the food you eat on one stage is not really to get you through that stage. It's actually preparing you for the following stage.
Mm-hmm.
So often on the rafting section, you might go, well, this is not that hard. I mean, the river's actually taking us down. We are paddling, but it's not that easy. But after this, we've got a massive hiking stage. So It's really important for us to fuel up now so that once we exit the raft, we're prepared for the next stage.
Yeah. And the other things that I remember seeing on Eco, we'll get into specifically the Eco Challenge stuff in a bit, but the other 2 things that came to mind were, like, you did the rope section in the dark, or Vuya Falls, or it was called, and then also swimming in those cold lakes. And these aren't necessarily short efforts, so I imagine you have to be like drinking and eating. I guess on the ropes you could probably just like sit back for a second, or what do you? Yeah, I don't know. Talk me through those 2 things.
Yeah. A lot of that time, those things we will actually, because I think, it probably goes without saying, but our team is very good. We're all very disciplined at nutritionally looking after ourselves in a race.
Sure.
And so a lot of that stuff it wouldn't even be spoken about. Like, as we're getting ready for the ropes, people will just be eating, grazing, just getting as much food in as they can, because we all know that exactly what you said, that once we're on the ropes, it's not going to be that easy to eat. But there is also opportunities, and if you're hungry, you'll find time to quickly have something to eat. The way the ropes work is they're often stages, so you might go up the ropes and you might be busy for 20 or 30 minutes, but then you'll get off one rope and then there might be a short walk and then you get onto the next rope kind of series. So during that time, we might even regroup as a team, just check in with everyone. Someone pulls out some food, shares it around, and then we go again. And same with the swimming in those lakes. Like I think the longest swim in those lakes it wouldn't have been any more than 10 minutes before you got out and had to walk again and then swim again. So
they made it seem like it was just like this nonstop swimming, but I guess there was some trekking in between the lakes, so that makes a lot more sense.
That's right. Yeah, no, it wasn't like that at all. So so you just find the time. You just we just
got it.
You just get good, I think, and knowing, man, I need to be eating, and I guess I'll just get. So when we make up those 12-hour food packs, probably what's quite sort of significant is that we basically budget for having one thing to eat per hour during the whole race. So in a 12-hour food pack, we basically, when we put those things together, each person will be putting 12 items into that 12-hour bag. And every third item, so every 3 hours is what we consider to be something quite substantial. And then there's 2 snacks and then something quite substantial. So every 3 hours, someone should, you should be eating something, more than a gel or more than kind of a little bar or something. So, so usually when you're racing, we're usually all quite mindful about kind of where we're at on that kind of cycle. And at some point, you'll kind of know, you go, I really need to be eating something quite significant in the next kind of hour or so, like I'm due for a sort of one of my 3 hourly kind of meals, so to speak.
Sure. And you're buying food on top of this, like locally, if the opportunity arises, but you don't necessarily count on that. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So we're completely self-sufficient. And then if we see food, we'll nearly always buy it and eat it.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me, I was going to mention this later, Eco Challenge, but I think now's a better time. I think it was the obstacle, there was some obstacle course podcast you're on, and this is the only time I'd heard this story, and I was literally on a long run yesterday, and I listened to it, and I was laughing so hard listening to you talk about at the end of Eco Challenge, like before your whole outrigger canoe fell apart, that you guys were like, oh yes, we have 3 to 4 hours left of like really hard work before we basically win this race. We're like far ahead. We got some time to spare. We're going to stop at this island, and a wedding happened to be going on, and and I guess you were looking for food to buy, but you just basically like hit the buffet right away. Like, can you tell me this story again? Because I found that hysterical and amazing, and I was like, how is that not on camera? That would have been amazing to see on the documentary, but no, they didn't show that.
There was no camera with us.
That's why.
Yeah. So what happened was, so that was, that's right. So on the last night, we had this outrigger paddle out. It was about 50. I think it may have been 50 kilometers island hopping out to the finish line. And by this stage, we got on the water. For those who don't know, haven't seen the show, I'm probably giving stuff away, but I guess we have already. We got on the water with a pretty comfortable lead. Like we were like, because we're a strong paddling team. So I was like, well, we're pretty sorted now. Like this, we can pretty much just enjoy this stage and kind of just do what, we'll pretty much win this race. But we got hit by quite a nasty storm, just kind of came out of nowhere that night. And we'd had quite an epic experience for a couple of hours. It had been kind of out there on the sort of frontier of what you can sort of go through in an adventure race. Like it was a really kind of period of extreme couple of hours. And we emerged from that, and then we sort of emerged, and it was a beautiful kind of clear starry night. The sea was still quite rough, but it was a clear night. And then paddling across, we're just kind of linking these islands, and we're probably getting close to halfway through the paddle, and we were actually short on food. Like we had sort of miscalculated how much the last 2 stages how that was going to work. Logistically, we made a bit of an error. So we were short on food, but we weren't worried. Like we were going to get to the finish, no problem. But as we were crossing to this sort of island that had a resort on it, a couple of my teammates, one in particular, was sort of like, I'm sort of starting to feel a bit sleepy. And we had time to burn. Like we had probably 5, 6, 7 hour lead or something. So I was like, so I sort of suggested, look, why don't we stop at this island? Even if it's a 10 or 20 minute stop, we'll run into the resort, buy some food, and then we'll recover that time. Like if we refuel and have a rest, we'll we'll paddle faster and enjoy the last kind of 20 or 30k to go as a result of that. Everyone was like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's invest some time in sort of to our well-being. So we pulled up on the beach, and two of my teammates, Chris and Stu, decided that they will walk up to the resort, because we had a bag of cash with us, and see if they can buy some food. Sophie was quite keen just to sleep on the beach, so it was literally a resort, and she kind of got onto one of the deck chairs on the beach. It was at night.
Amazing.
And I thought, I'll just wait with Sophie. I'll just kind of sit here by the boat and things. But then after a couple of minutes, I was like, I might as well not. I mean, I'm not really achieving anything by sitting here. I wasn't tired, sleepy tired. I was steering the boat, so you stay engaged, mentally engaged doing that. I thought I might as well walk up to the buffet, up to the restaurant where all these lights are going, where the people are, and see what's going on. So I walked in, and there's clearly a wedding going on. Like the wedding had finished. They were having their kind of dinner.
Oh, the wedding had finished. Wait, were the people still there though?
Oh yeah, they were having their kind of like their dinner, the big meal type thing.
Oh, so it wasn't. They were still there.
Oh, the wedding ceremony had finished.
Okay, got it.
But they're having the wedding celebration, and so the bride and groom are sitting there with all the tables set up and all their friends and gathered around, and but the buffet was still there, the food buffet. And I spotted Chris and Stu kind of over in the corner of the restaurant talking to the staff, obviously negotiating, can we buy some food, or, how's this going to work? And we're all standing there in our paddling gear, like we literally just came straight. Well, we were still racing, and we got our race bibs on.
This is what, 6 days? This is 6 days into your thing. Like, you guys haven't showered or anything, right? Like, no, you're just disgusting.
Been pretty wet.
Oh, man.
But we definitely looked pretty rough. And then I kind of figured, well, I might as well just start eating. I mean, adventure racing is pretty feral, and a lot of modern or normal rules don't apply to adventure races. And I figured the worst thing they can do is tell me to stop. So I just basically just stood at the buffet and just started eating. I was just picking up food and eating it. And you can imagine what a buffet's like. And then I sort of worked my way down to the dessert end of the buffet and started eating cakes and creams, and I actually ate as much as I kind of could, really, within sort of 5 mints of just standing there grazing.
And no one stopped you?
No one stopped me. No.
Did you get a plate, or were you like literally just like grabbing things and putting it in your mouth?
I was helping myself. Yeah, I was going to eat as much as I can until they kind of kicked me out. And then I thought, I better grab some stuff for Sophie. So then I grabbed a couple of handfuls of food and started walking back to where Sophie was. And then about 10 minutes later, Chris and Stu turned up, and they'd brought some food and drinks, and they had coffees and some cans of Coke and some big containers full of curry and rice and things. So the four of us sat on the beach and had this big meal, like a real big meal.
But you had already stuffed yourself, and did you tell them about that part?
Pretty cool, yeah. And then,
oh my goodness, that is so amazing.
Yeah, that was funny. And then we got paddling again. And then we were laughing. We were like, man, this is great. We're all awake. We've all had good food. Let's just smash this out and win this race and be done with it.
And then your boat fell apart.
Then the adventure began.
Oh my God, you must have been so pissed. I've heard you talk about that again, just in prepping for this podcast. I've heard you talk about that whole situation. We won't have you go through that whole story again. Like, people can watch it, but basically your boat just completely fell apart, and just the whole them not time crediting you and all this. I mean, oh man, I would be proper pissed about that. But you won anyway, so hey, that's what matters, right? But again, I'm just like picturing you guys like in your disgusting like wet gear, just like crashing a wedding. It was amazing. Yeah, everything you can do for food, I love it. All right, so let's keep moving along. Really quick question here about, okay, there are sleep requirements I heard you talk about in these races often. I think you said it was 11 hours for Eco, but are there any like weigh-ins ever? Like, I know ultra runs often will have weigh-ins, and making sure that you're properly hydrating just for like a safety concern. Like, is there anything required in terms of like, you must carry this many calories with you, or you need to weigh yourself, or anything like that when it comes to adventure racing?
No.
Nothing.
No.
Okay. It's like you have this gear, but do whatever you want for food.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There is medical staff at the different checkpoints, and they will stop. They have the right to stop athletes if they think what the athlete is doing is kind of dangerous. But that very rarely happens. It does happen sometimes, but it's very rare. But no, it's up to us, really.
Huh. Very interesting. I mean, it's in your best interest, obviously, to bring food and do all that stuff. Logistically, with these 12-hour bags you're talking about, and I guess all your gear, are they just like kind of distributing them amongst the various checkpoints for you? Is that what happens?
Pretty much, yep. So in an unsupported race where the organisation move all our logistics around is we essentially get a plan, and we'll have gearboxes kind of A, B, C, D, and E, and we'll basically just get told at the end of this stage you'll see box A, at the end of this stage you'll see box B, etc. And then we just need to make sure that the right stuff goes into the right boxes. And it is you definitely don't want to get that wrong. We have got it wrong in the past, and it's not good. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the right stuff has gone into the right box.
Got it.
But in Eco Challenge, we had a support person driving around. So we had a guy from New Zealand, and he was essentially meeting us at the camps. So he was resupplying us without what we needed.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that actually, in terms of like that isn't typical though, right? That you have someone like essentially like cooking for you and getting things ready at camp and stuff.
No, it used to be. It used to be standard, and then it went away. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time since we've had a race where we had a support person. Most of the races we do. Sorry?
It must have been nice then to have someone.
Yeah. Totally.
Come back to you.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is nice. Yeah.
Let's briefly talk about the team dynamic. You're actually my first guest that is in a team sport, which is awesome. And I really enjoyed the short film called For the Team. That was all about your victory at Reunion Island, that adventure race in 2018. And of course, Sophie would have been there, but I guess she broke her ankle, so you had Fleur on your team instead. And I guess just real fast for my listeners, because we haven't really spoken about who your team is or anything, but the New Zealand team, I mean, it's kind of like this historic, again, like the sport was born in New Zealand, and you guys are known for like really dominating it. But the team as we know it now has been in place since 2014. That's when Stu joined. And then 2011, it was Sophie and Chris and yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Yes. Yep.
So you guys have been together for so long. I imagine you guys just like kind of just know all the ins and outs. Like, you probably don't even need to like talk to each other. You could just like look at each other and kind of know where each other, know where everyone's at. But you're working hard for the team, and you talk about that in this film. But when it comes to like fueling and all that stuff, like you're monitoring yourself, but you kind of, especially as captain, have to kind of keep an eye on everyone else. And so does that team dynamic like affect any of your fueling strategies? And maybe we've already kind of covered it in that you're preparing all these bags and you guys are sharing some stuff, but are there any other considerations at all when it comes to the team? Like, I mean, have you guys ever run out of food and water or had to ration supplies as a team or anything like that?
Yes, we have. We have run out before. Sometimes the stages can take a lot longer than what the race directors tell us. So, and to be fair, those stages, they are generally only guides. So they'll give us the maps, and they'll say, we think a fast time for this is going to be 21 hours. And we go, right, well, that's us. We'll take 21 hours worth of food. But we get out there and find that it's actually 35 hours for whatever reason.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know. Sometimes things just blow out for lots of different reasons. So we normally take a bit of extra food, but we've definitely run out of food before. And then we've also struggled to find water in races before as well. Thankfully for not too long. But most of the time, I think we're pretty good at foreseeing that. Like we actually got pretty good now at looking at stages and going, well, I think this is going to take longer or less or longer, so let's sort of adjust accordingly. If in doubt, we'll always carry more. Like we're probably one of the teams that will carry bigger packs if we're unsure about something. And then I think out on course, I think, we all probably chip into the nutrition thing. Like I think we're often reminding each other just to make sure we're eating and drinking. Like we'll often say, like there's stuff like, we've only got 6 hours to go in this stage team, so there's no point in carrying food out. And so we might just start getting food out and eating it, or we might, if we're going for a village, we might even just give it to people, or depending on what it is, we might just kind of empty it out for the wildlife to kind of have a taste. So yeah, we're quite mindful of our nutrition all the time, I think, because we obviously don't want to be carrying more food around than we need. Often we'll just try and eat it. Like if we've got too much, we'll go, we might as well just put it in, we might as well eat it then. And then, then we kind of know it's going to be of some use somewhere along the line. But I think,
what's the longest you've gone without food?
I think, to be honest, I don't sort of remember us ever running out in a race and not having any food at all. What tends to happen is we realise that we're getting low, and then we'll go on to sort of start rationing it. And so I think in the World Champs in Brazil, we ran out of food. There's one stage I think took us about 3 days, and which is about twice as long as they expected it to take. So I know for the last day, it was pretty grim. Like I can't even remember to be honest, but I think what we decided, that we were in 2 pack crafts and 2 boats. There was Sophie and I were in one, and Chris and Stu were in the other. So what we decided is that we'll just kind of each boat just kind of share what food you've got left, because it wasn't practical for us to kind of always be together as a 4. So Stu and Chris typically will probably eat more than combined than Sophie and I. And then so I just remember that last day, like Sophie and I looking at our food bag, and we had like, whatever it was like half a packet of like dried mango and like 2 gels and 2 Nun tablets or something, and that was to last us for 12 hours or something. But we had plenty of water. We had unlimited fresh drinking water, and to be honest, once you get after about 50 hours of racing, that's the critical time when you seem to be able to you definitely don't want to run out of food. In that time, it can really knock you around. But in the later stages of the race, I think, especially for me, you seem to be able to go without food quite easily if you need to. I think you just start burning kind of your body reserves more. So yeah, I remember thinking on that particular time in the Pantanal in Brazil, it would have been nice to have some more food, but it wasn't really an issue. Like as long as we had water to drink and it seemed
you couldn't just catch a piranha and cook it up or something.
I don't know if you had got desperate. There was plenty of marine life, and there was piranhas in there for sure. But no, we didn't quite get to that level, thankfully.
Yeah. No, I remember I heard you talk about the Pantanal race. I've actually traveled there, and it's like so gorgeous. But I heard you talking about it just being like one of the most remote places you've been, and how it would take a while to kind of get help. So to run out of food or run low on supplies there is a little concerning, to say the least. Which kind of leads me into my next chunk here, which is extreme situations. And there are many when it comes to adventure racing: extreme temperature changes, altitude shifts, minimal sleep, and that all obviously affects your ability to fuel adequately and consistently. So I guess my next question on this is extreme sleep deprivation. And again, I know there are some, minimal requirements for sleep. And one of the things in Eco that was very interesting hearing you speak about on another podcast, which they definitely did not show in the show because that would have been, more boring. But you said you got 2 full nights of sleep, which is like almost unheard of in an adventure race, I think. But how does sleep deprivation typically, does it affect your ability to fuel at all, or struggles with just getting food down and remembering to eat, or you're just so kind of used to all of this, it's not really an issue?
I think it's probably more affects the less experienced teams. Like we've sort of learned now the effects of sleep deprivation on all aspects of kind of racing. So we actually work pretty hard to avoid getting into what we consider to be a really sleep deprived state. So even if there's not mandatory sleep, our team is pretty disciplined to actually just stop and take some sleep ourselves, just because we know that we're not moving efficiently, we're not looking after ourselves properly, we're prone to making navigational mistakes, if we try and push on. So I guess for us, it's a lot more about preventative stuff than sort of having to manage things.
Got it.
But we've also learned that that good nutrition and plenty of fuel on board will actually counter sleep deprivation as well. So by making sure the body's plenty of fuel. So often if someone's getting sleepy now, like we'll often the first thing they do is actually get a decent amount of food in. It's like, well, actually and sometimes it can be that the food that you're carrying is stuff that doesn't excite you. So you might generally what's in your pack, and you're going, well, I should be eating something, but right now there's nothing in my pack that I actually want. And then it's just a matter of asking your teammates. It's like, hey, who's got, if there's something you specifically want, we just ask the teammates, and if they've got it, they'll give it to you. They're like, yeah, sweet, here's this food. If this is the only thing you'll eat right now, then enjoy. And often we'll trade. Often you kind of trade. It may not be like at the time, but you kind of know that if you've given one of your teammates a significant amount of your food, you can't expect at some stage in the race they'll give that back.
Yeah.
So, doesn't always happen, but that's all right.
Yeah. You've really demonstrated an ability to remain calm and composed under so many different types of situations, extreme situations included, where many people would have been completely freaking out. So I know for you, like the boat falling apart at the end, like the way they recorded it just made it seem like you guys were about to drown. Like literally, I remember finishing, like my husband and I definitely binged that whole series. And I remember getting to that point, we're like, oh my God, we have to stay up later and figure out what happened. But of course, again, in reality, like you had mentioned, oh, it was just more of a nuisance, not a big deal. But any tips on how you remain calm under pressure? Like, do you practice certain techniques? Again, is it just down to experience? Anything you can share there.
I think a lot of it is probably more, to me, it's probably more sort of philosophical. I think as a generalization, I guess as a theme or a philosophy that, one thing that I've always have learned to believe, and this is, I think my teammates are sort of on the same page, is that is about what sort of behavior is helpful in any situation. And I guess, we've learned event racing, and most things I think in life is that, when you're faced with a challenge or a problem or an obstacle of some sort, or something's not going to plan, then kind of freaking out and panicking and, making irrational decisions, or generally would sort of classify that as unhelpful behavior. So the question we often ask ourselves is, I guess is within our team, we've sort of had many discussions about how we continue to be a high performing team. What are the tools and what are the mechanics of that, and what does it look like? And one of the questions, that I think we're all very good at asking ourselves in those times of challenge and controversy, when exactly what happened at Eco Challenge, is before you say anything or do something, is asking the question, well, how is this actually helpful? How is this helpful to the situation? And I think if you sort of live by that philosophy, the most helpful thing you can probably do at that point is actually to be quite calm, and to just take some time to figure out really what the situation is and what is the best way to fix that. You're ultimately trying to find the best solution in the shortest time possible. And so you don't want to waste energy on stuff that's not going to be helpful. There's no point in blaming the organisers for faulty equipment, or blaming someone for not doing this or doing that, or questioning why has this happened or how did this happen. We're very good at going, well, what's helpful right now is figuring out how we're going to fix this. We actually need to get to the finish line somehow as quick as we can. Right now we're all floating around in the ocean with a broken boat.
So, and when you can't fix it, maybe not in this circumstance, but I'm sure there have been moments in your very long history of venture racing where you've totally lost it, or maybe not totally, but partially, because sometimes we need to just release, right? I imagine you feel these emotions, and you're exhausted, you're tired, you're fatigued, maybe at the end of the race.
Yeah.
Like, what has there been a moment where you were not so calm? If you want to share it.
Yeah, it has been. I wouldn't say I've just sort of fully lost it. I have done that a few times in my life, more when I've been an outdoor educator with my students. I don't think I've ever lost it with my teammates like that. I may have thought that in my mind, but I've gone, well, that's just not going to be helpful right now to kind of do that. It's more that you sort of, I think for me, there's been a few occasions where I've said something quite calmly, but it was a dig. It wasn't helpful. It wasn't intended to be. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, and you just regret that. Like, I've just regretted it, and then I end up feeling bad, and then obviously I want to fix things. And then you're wasting energy on sort of apologising, and your teammates are upset, and there's been a couple of occasions like that, and I think the last one of those was I think in 2015. I said something that I regretted, and I was calm, but it was just an unhelpful thing to say, and it was just frustration and kind of. I didn't think the team were racing sensibly, and they weren't listening to kind of, what I was. Because I guess, to be fair to me, in my defence, is that often before the race, we as a team we'll come up with we essentially will agree on a race strategy, and then I see one of my roles as team captain is actually to play that race strategy out. So before the race, the whole team will buy into the strategy. How are we going to race this race? And we'll all agree on that. Then we get out there, and then the team can start to be different to what the strategy is. And then so I'm often the one saying, hey guys, this is not what we talked about at the start. And that's what happened in that race. And in that, I think 2 or 3 things happened where I was basically trying to get the team to go, this is not what we agreed on. This is, and then I actually did. I snapped. I reached a breaking point. And then I sort of said a few things I regretted saying. But it was probably quite effective. But But yeah, there's a few things like that. So I guess over the time you just learn better strategies on how to deal with those things.
Well, that's a pretty good track record. Last time that happened was 2015. I think I can't even count on 2 hands the number of times I've lost it in the last month. So, granted, I have 2 little kids and COVID and everything.
My teammates might have a different answer to that question.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's true. That is very true. But I mean, there's so many dimensions, so many like different things going on in the sport. Again, I find it fascinating, not even just from a nutrition standpoint, but it's very interesting. So I know we've already at an hour and a half. So if you have time, I just press on with some more questions. Let's move into Eco Challenge specifically. You've already answered tons of my questions that also relate, but for anyone who hasn't watched it, like I will warn you in the beginning, spoiler alert, but it's a little too late for that. But the race was 671 kilometers. The last time an Eco Challenge happened was also in Fiji, but it was in 2002. And that was an event you also won. So how did the 2002 event compare to this one, aside from the fact that you are, of course, now much older and you were racing on a different team?
I guess it was quite similar. The course was similar. Yeah, okay. So I think they generally kind of reused the course from last time, but I actually didn't remember a lot of the course, and it wasn't usually until after I'd completed a stage, and then one of the staff would sort of say to me, this happened a number of times, my teammates were kind of making a joke about it, where one of the race staff would sort of say to me, do you remember that from last time? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So it might as well have been a new country, a new race, but I guess I've spent so much time in the Pacific Islands that environment is pretty familiar, for me. New Zealand and the Pacific Islands are kind of my, that's my heritage. They're my home. So racing in Fiji was very easy. I think, for me, it wasn't a really unknown kind of sort of quantity, but the courses were very similar. I think the distance was about the same. The racing was very similar, and the finish time was almost identical, like our time on course.
Yeah. Is there a difference between Eco Challenge events and other adventure races, like, the World Championships, or is it simply like a branding thing and it being televised and cameras with you and stuff?
Yeah, that's right. That's mainly the difference. Yeah. Okay. Like, so on course, No, World Champs or other big races. There's a big race in New Zealand called God Zone.
That's coming up for you, right?
Yeah, that's in March. It was supposed to be this month, but because of COVID, it was March. But no, on course, the mechanics and the challenges and the way things work are pretty much the same. I mean, Eco is a real fun event to be part of because of the hype. There's camera crews around, there's helicopters buzzing. Bear Grylls is sort of backflipping out of helicopters and having a chat to you. And, there's that kind of circus kind of around it, which is quite fun. But the other races are pretty much the same without the TV production happening alongside.
I have 2 questions specific to Eco Challenge. Number 1 is about the film crew. I was so curious about how that worked with the film crew following you guys all around, because I know they weren't with you the entire time, and I read an article in the LA Times about just like applying for that job. Obviously, you have to be pretty athletic. That's a very big understatement. But you have to be very fit to be a camera crew following these teams around. But they were with you huge chunks of the time. And you guys are also going at a good clip. You're not just moseying around. So I was very interested in that aspect, and I kept asking my husband. He's like, "Oh, just shut up already, watch the show." I was like, "But how do you do this? How are they? I don't understand, because there's this whole other person. How are they getting these shots?" But I imagine it was distracting. First of all, just the aspect of constantly being interviewed and all aspects of this week-long thing. You're trying to just focus on all this stuff. You're tired, whatever. But also the fact that you have this almost 5th team member with you in a way, who's kind of there was one, I don't know if you remember this part of the series where some team was stuck in the canyon and the water went up. Yeah, the film crew, the guy was right there with them, trapped in there. Did it stress you out having essentially almost this additional team member that you had to worry about, or were you distracted by having this person? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess our team and a number of the other top teams, the difference there is probably not as much for us, because often, even at World Champs, they'll often tag a cameraman with us for a stage. Or they're not doing productions to the same capacity, obviously, but they will still send people into the field, and it may just be a stills photographer, or it might just be for just a live update. So I guess having someone tagging along with us is not that unusual on the grand scheme of things. And I think this comes with experience as well. So Chris and Stu are our navigators. Chris is our main navigator, and Stu's kind of backing him up. So I'll generally, you may not notice, but I kind of tend to be the one speaking for the team, and and that's largely deliberate. I will often protect those guys from the media to allow them to kind of not be distracted and to do their job. So often, and I, out of all the teammates, I'm the one who's actually had some media training. So I kind of learned what the cameramen are after, what the soundbite they'll potentially want. And I'll generally try and give them some stuff, and then they will actually leave us alone a lot of the time. If you actually give them what they want, they go, "Well, I've got the shot, I've got the soundbite, I don't really need any more. I'll get a helicopter back up and I'll leave you guys alone." And so we actually didn't have the cameraman with us all that much, because often they would just kind of pick up something, get the shot they wanted, get the soundbite, and be gone. What we did find quite intrusive is that for the first time ever, they actually mic'd us up. So Sophie and I mainly were wearing mics, and they were recording 24/7.
What? Really?
Yeah, what we were saying. Wow. And there was a little bit of muck around with that. We had to kind of, every time we came into a camp, we'd need to go and get our batteries changed, and they would mic us up again and do different things. And towards the end of the race, I actually said to them, "No, we're not going to wear these mics anymore," because we actually did find that they became a bit intrusive, and that it was censoring what we wanted to talk about. when we're out there in the field, just the four of us, you know. And it's not like we're talking about anything, you know, it wasn't like we were talking about sort of super secretive stuff or anything, but it just felt that, you know, when you're out there on those big long treks and stuff, you just want to talk to your teammates about, and you might want to just talk about stuff that's happening in your personal lives. And, you know, you might ask one of your teammates, you know, just how's your relationship going, or how's your marriage, or how are your kids or something. And we just didn't want that stuff being recorded. So we found that we would want to talk with our teammates about something meaningful, but we couldn't. You know, you start talking and then someone starts pointing at their mic going, no, don't. You know, so towards the end of the race, I sort of said to them, look, no, we're not going to wear these mics anymore. Sorry, we're not. And they were really respectful. They were like, fine, I understand, that's fine. And I don't think, I think they hardly any of that stuff anyway. So I don't know if they'd ever do that again if they did
that
the race.
That seems really unnecessary, because, like, I mean, there's stuff, of course, if you're talking like strategy type stuff or whatever, but yeah, just in the terms of like the personal nature of things, or even just like you wanted to go to the bathroom or like anything personal at all. Like,
it's all recorded.
That's insane. That's crazy. It just seems very Big Brother-esque and very unnecessarily intrusive. Wow, that's very interesting. So another point on filming, you know, what we see on film or on this, you know, what was actually, you know, captured in the series versus reality. And I think this is a really big one, especially when it comes to sleep and nutrition. And I want to explore that a little bit more. We've already explored it somewhat. Like, obviously, we didn't see you crashing the wedding, getting all that nutrition. But, you know, obviously, they're dramatizing part of this to be like, oh, you know, they're barely eating and they're barely sleeping and they're completely like, you know, they're making it out to be this whole thing, which I understand. But there were sleep requirements. They don't talk about that. And obviously, I know you guys were eating. And as you mentioned, again, you slept these 2 nights and you felt great. You're like, oh, it's like a holiday in Fiji. So it's just kind of funny. But I went back and rewatched just clips of your team to see if I could like what I could see for the eating and drinking. Because, you know, when I was watching, I wasn't like, I mean, I was paying attention just as a dietitian. I was curious, but I wasn't catching everything. So I couldn't, you know, I wasn't seeing a ton, but I would always see your camelbacks. You know, I saw you guys coming into a village eating what looked like real food out of like to-go containers. So clearly you got that from somewhere. I saw Sophie with her water bottle all the time, or eating a bar. And Camp 4, you guys were like all eating what looked like a platter of fruit, and I couldn't even tell what else. But, you know, you were always like in the transitions. If you weren't, like, even while you were being interviewed, if you weren't prepping your gear, you were munching on something. So, you know, it's very interesting, like just all of that stuff that wasn't quite captured. And again, that's not what people want to hear about when, you know, the world's toughest race. But just kind of a note to my listeners that, like, you guys, I mean, yes, you guys are superhuman in a way, but truly you are only human. So you are all doing these things, you know, like I imagine like all of the like not very pretty details of things. Like if you're in a kayak for 4 hours, 6 hours, like at some point you have to go to the bathroom, like, you know, on an Ironman, you're like peeing on your bike or doing whatever you're doing. Like you're just human beings. So I thought that was interesting. But is there anything that I haven't mentioned or we haven't talked about that we didn't see on camera, especially when it comes to food, or any other kind of fun tidbits that you want to share? And it's okay if not, if we've covered it all, but just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I guess what I'd say is that, like, I think the Eco World's Toughest Race, I do think they did a really good job of telling the adventure racing story. And I think it was a wise move of them not to try and explain to people the mandatory sleep thing. Like, I reckon that would have been just added a whole lot of confusion to people. You know, you start with dark zones, and then these teams, they have to sleep certain times and everything. And then I think it would have been probably a little bit more complicated than necessary. And while that race, you know, had some sort of little unique things, I think if you throw a blanket across the whole sport, in most of the races we do, there isn't actually mandatory sleep, and you just sleep when you feel like you need to. And that means that if you want to be competitive, you might actually be racing, you know, 24 hours out of a 24-hour day. You're on the go the whole time. So I think I think in terms of telling an adventure racing story, I think they did a really good job in that sense. But you're right, you know, like we did, because they shut the course because of flooding on the second night, we got a full night's sleep, and then we hit because of that, we then hit the dark zone. We weren't allowed to go whitewater rafting until the following day, so we had another almost full night's sleep. And then when we come into the camps, Mark, our support person, he would have meals prepped for us. He was making us fresh coffee. He'd have heaps of fruit. We'd pass through villages. Some of the villages, there were stores. We could actually go and buy stuff from the village store. I think we only actually did that twice, I think, in the whole race, though. Because most of the time we actually had enough food on board, and we just didn't want the delay of kind of mucking around, getting money out and buying food, because we didn't need it. We didn't need it at that time. No, so I think it was pretty. I think overall it was there wasn't. It was definitely just a normal race for us in most respects. It just happened to be we were filming it at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift gears away from Eco Challenge. Now, you developed a heart condition as an adult and had 3 corrective surgeries. When did these happen, and has this affected your athletic career at all, or is it something you take into consideration these days at all?
Oh, yeah, I do take it into consideration. I first noticed the heart condition in the late 90s. I think I actually had it through my mountain biking career, but it was so sporadic. I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was just overtraining or something weird. It would just kind of pop up every now and again. But in pretty much around 2000, I got it diagnosed, and that's when I had my first corrective surgery, I think, from memory. So I guess I've had it now for 20 years or something now. And I am mindful of it. I think almost on a daily basis, I'm grateful when my heart is normal and I can go and train and do the things I want to do. And it, without kind of willing the condition to kind of come back, I'm also aware that, I've been told by the surgeons who I kind of know quite well now. So I've had three surgeries in that time. Is that it probably will return one day. So I guess every day that it hasn't returned, I almost acknowledge that on a daily basis that I can sort of live another normal day before this thing may come back again. And I'm not concerned about it in terms of life-threatening sort of stuff, but it is definitely annoying, and it is quite limiting what I can do. If the condition comes back. So, and the worst, the worst scenario for me would be for it to come back, during a race or right before a big race or something. So it is something it is sort of, reasonably on my mind a lot of the time. And it's a good reason though to stay fit and healthy as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, during your racing career as well, and I guess sometime not that long after that, since you have 3 teenage kids, you did become a dad. You have 3 kids, and I'm curious to hear if this also affected your training and racing at all, especially when they were quite young.
This is the kids?
Kids, yeah. Yeah, becoming a dad, yeah.
No, I don't think I don't think they changed training and racing too much. In fact, I think being sort of I was a professional event racer when they were real young, and and I actually think I was very fortunate because it actually gave me, and I still have quite a lot of flexibility, but during that time it gave me plenty of flexibility to kind of be quite present with them, so and be around. So even now, like even today, for example, like I can plan my day around being around when my kids finish school. So, like I thought, my son and I are going to hook up and do something, once he finishes school today. So, I guess having that flexibility means I can sort of actually pick and choose kind of what I do and when I do it and be around for them. So I think it's been good. I think probably what it has changed is more what I do recreationally. Like I used to do a lot of quite challenging whitewater kayaking, which is a reasonably dangerous sport. It feels dangerous to me anyway. And I kind of backed off on that some years ago. I remember paddling a very, very challenging whitewater river on the west coast. We flew into the mountains by helicopter and paddling out. And I remember just paddling this whitewater going, man, there's no room for error here. Like if you make a mistake in this level of whitewater, the consequences are pretty serious. I mean, you'll get seriously hurt, or the worst case scenario, you drown. And I just remember thinking that day that it's probably not the best thing to be doing with a young family. And I haven't really done that sort of stuff since. Really, I kind of I still love going kayaking, but I just do stuff that's a lot safer and less challenging.
I feel like if you think it's dangerous, it must be extremely dangerous. You have like a whole different risk tolerance than some of us.
Yeah,
but
yeah, unless you're doing that stuff all the time. Like I got mates
sure.
that's what they do all the time, and I don't think it's that dangerous for them. It was just a bit more dangerous for me because I wasn't doing that all that regularly. So they would often joke, like I'm pretty much just sort of getting off the couch and into the helicopter, and then the next thing you know, you're kind of, you're paddling a sort of grade 5 kind of technical river. So yeah.
And speaking of kids, I mean, you're so active with your kids, and I follow you on Instagram and see all the ventures you go on with your son and
Oh, cool.
your daughter.
Yeah.
You have 2 daughters and 1 son, right? Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's just so awesome, and I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I just cannot wait until they're old enough that I can do adventures with them. But yeah, what tips do you have on kind of getting kids involved in the outdoors, or anything you want to speak to on this topic?
I think my advice to people is just to start them young. Like kids are so malleable and adaptable and adjustable that whatever you do with them is normal for them. And I think I've had quite a few parents talk to me in more recent years and kind of say they wish their kids were sort of more like mine. And I think really what they're meaning by that is that they don't have that much control over their kids anymore because they're teenagers and they're obviously into, they've sort of been trapped by kind of social media and, gaming and apps and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the parents would rather their kids got outside and was active in the outdoors. But it's kind of too late. Like they've sort of, and I never really say it to people, but that's really what I'm thinking, is they've actually left it too late. Whereas, for my kids, like being active in the outdoors daily is a normal part of life. So they don't really know any different because that's what they grew up with. So it's not that unusual to go and, it's almost on. I mean, I've got, like, as you know now, I've got 3 teenagers, so they are nearly all 3 of them now are independently taking ownership of being active in the outdoors on a daily basis on some sort. So they'll just come home and go, well, I need to go for a run or a bike ride, or I might go for a paddle. We live at a beach or something, or they've got events they're training for, whether it be adventure racing or soccer or orienteering or whatever it is. They've got an event coming up, and we do a lot of seasonal stuff, so they look forward to going skiing. Ski season comes along, so they know, it'll be great to get into the mountains, do some skiing, and summer's coming around, so it'll be fun to do some river trips and things. So they're just growing up with that, and I just think that adventure is accessible to everyone at different ages. So our kids have been involved in adventure their whole lives, but I mean, the first adventures when they were kids your age, that was just being outside and playing in the forest and just throwing stones into a creek or walking down the beach and picking up rocks. That's adventure as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it doesn't have to be sort of skydiving and bungee jumping.
Absolutely. I love it. Yeah, totally goals for what I have. I envision with my kids, and even just like my husband, we all went as a family to do this 50-miler in New York, like in upstate New York, and and he finished his 50-miler, and my 3-year-old, I was pregnant with my second at the time, and and he picked her up and carried her to the finish line, and she's just like so excited, but it's like just another race, and she's like cheering on all the runners as she does at all the races, and it's like no big deal. Oh yeah, mommy and daddy are running long this weekend. So it's like I can't wait to kind of get her involved in that beyond just being in the stroller or whatever. And she's already done like some short hikes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's super exciting stuff. We live in New York City, not the same as living in New Zealand in nature, but we do what we can. Your everyday diet now, would you say it's kind of, you would describe it in a similar fashion to the one you grew up with?
I think so. Yeah, I think we're pretty lucky where we live regionally in New Zealand. There's a lot of produce grown here. We have a lot of fruit and a lot of seasonal fruit. So we can buy, and we often a lot of that stuff we can just buy from the roadside. And so I think for us, I mean, my age group in New Zealand, my generation and probably the older people, I think it's still very ingrained in us that meat is a very important part of your diet. Like we grew up with that. So we eat a lot less meat now as a family. And, we probably eat 3 meat meals a week or something. And largely that's because we enjoy it. But I think we do have, I'd like to believe we've got pretty good quality meat here in New Zealand. Like it's, we see often where the animals are being farmed, and they, they're in pretty amazing conditions. That where the New Zealand farming is quite traditional.
Yeah.
So I think we've got access to pretty good meat, and so we do enjoy some of that. And then same with we have good fruit, vegetables, and lots of seasonal fruit here where I live. And I think we just eat fairly, what I consider to be just a fairly natural food diet. We limit processed food. Like we hardly ever buy frozen, pre-prepared stuff, hardly ever. Mm-hmm. And we just cook pretty basic meals from basic ingredients.
Do you cook, or your wife cooks, or both?
We both cook. I probably will cook more so when I'm home. I'm typically the one who travels more. I do enjoy cooking, and I don't think my wife would be upset if I said that the family enjoy it more if I cook. Mm-hmm. So generally when I'm home, I'll sort of cook the main meals. As a general rule, and then so I guess for breakfast at this time of year for us is often just some good quality cereal. We don't drink a lot of milk in our house. My wife and I actually, after growing up, we actually didn't like dairy milk, so we generally drink almond milk or rice milk purely by just preference. So our kids have got kind of used to that as well. And then we'll just have a lot of fruit, a lot of this time of year there's lots of strawberries around, so we're eating a lot of strawberries for with our breakfast. And then lunch is just often just some we're quite good quality breads. I quite like the kind of the German style sort of rye breads and things. And it's just bread and avocado, and we've got a good local peanut butter company here that makes that. So just we eat a lot of that, and I don't know, just kind of salads and things. And then dinners is just lots of veggie based meals with sometimes a bit of rice and sometimes pasta and meat and fish and things.
Awesome. Now you're 48 years old and still totally crushing it, even though you're quick to say that your team would be much faster without you. I know that longevity in the sport, or just in just sporting life generally, is a really high priority goal for you. How do you help kind of prevent injury and keep your body as strong as it is, as you get older?
I think I am sort of a little bit blessed. Like I just with my genes that my family have passed on to me, I seem to be have had a pretty amazing career that's been largely injury free. And I've had a few injuries, but they're usually a direct result of like a high speed crash on my mountain bike or doing something like that. I think our diet is definitely contributes towards that. There is a guy in Nelson, a nutritionist that I go and see from time to time, just if I'm feeling like I need some advice on something, and he'll often prescribe some supplements, but they're only sort of based on kind of what he thinks might be helpful at that time. There's nothing ever just maintenance, like just take this and just keep taking it. It's like take this for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks and then stop it. And then he'll often try and find nutrition, just normal food ways of kind of reaching the same goal as well. So I think the help that he's given me over the years has definitely done that. And then the other thing I reckon that's definitely helped is training multiple disciplines. Like, because I essentially share my training between running, biking, and kayaking.
Yeah, it's lower impact, I guess.
Yeah, and you can pick and choose things. So like if I go for a really hard run one day and the next day my legs, or next few days my legs haven't recovered, I can just either do some recovery bike riding, or I can just go paddling for a few days and just lengthen my paddling. And then if for some reason my upper body's feeling it's not recovering quite right, then I can just take a few days off paddling and focus on and just do more running. So having the different sports to train for, I think, is really good, because it just, you can listen to your body and still go out and train, but just go and do different things that and I think that's really good for just balance. And then obviously I do a lot of cross training. So, in the winter I do a lot of skiing and ski touring, and just doing stuff with the family, hiking trips and whatever it is you do. My son and I do quite a lot of kiteboarding. I'm just teaching my youngest daughter that at the moment. So I think just having a good cross section of things, just working on that agility and through different activity. I think all that actually helps just avoid injury, because you're never actually doing the same thing for that long.
Yeah, and I think just also mentally, the fact that, because like obviously burnout is a real thing, both physically and mentally, but the fact that so much of the quote unquote training you do is not even like it's training, but it's not really training. It's, as you say, recreational. It's fun. It's just part of your life. It's part of being with your kids, bonding with your kids. It's just part of your day, but it is contributing towards your fitness. And you said before, like there's kind of like your everyday maintenance, like this is just my life kind of training, and it's super fun. And then there's the super kind of focused training leading up to an event. And I imagine that also really contributes to the fact that you are 48 and still going strong.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you have Godzone coming up in March, which hopefully will happen. And Eco Challenge Patagonia is, at this point in time, I've heard you talk kind of not really being sure, but I'm not sure if it's happening or when next year, but is that something that's a possibility for you, or are you kind of done with that?
No, it's definitely a possibility. It'll depend a bit on timing, when it is, and also probably depend a bit on New Zealand kind of restrictions at the moment. If we leave New Zealand, which is not easy to do, coming back is even harder. And
interesting.
We would need to quarantine for 2 weeks coming back into New Zealand, which we'd have to pay for ourselves.
Oh, wow.
So there's lots of reasons not to travel. And whether that's next year, I don't know. So yeah,
so they don't know if it's happening yet. They still don't know.
No, they seem to be in a bit of a holding pattern. Yeah, so it's very unknown at this stage what next year will bring.
Because I think I saw like one of the potential dates was like February or something, and maybe there's another one that was a little bit later. But I mean, that's kind of soon. It's not that far off.
No,
a lot of planning.
I don't. It's hard to imagine they were ever serious about that date. I sort of wondered if they were just sort of creating, just using that to create a bit of hype. But no, they definitely came back and said if it happens in Patagonia, it'll be November next year.
Okay, got it. Okay, so there's a little more time now. And Patagonia, because you've spoken before about not, because of your heart, not being able to compete or train at altitude. Is Patagonia doable for you from that respect?
It should be, yeah. I don't know for sure. I would have some concerns, but I wouldn't be too worried at Patagonia, because it's so extreme down there. Like, I don't imagine they would, if they went high, they wouldn't go for long, because you wouldn't risk it as a course designer. You wouldn't risk sending people high in those mountains for long.
Sure.
Because the chances are, it wouldn't work. Yeah.
Have you raced down there before?
I've raced in the northern part of Patagonia before. Yeah, not in the southern part. I'm not entirely sure where it'll be. I suspect it'll be in the northern part, but it'd be quite nice if it was in the southern part.
Oh, it's gorgeous down there. It's so epic down there. But yeah, as they say, you can have 4 seasons in one day, pretty much. So it is very unpredictable and very extreme. Anyways, we have been talking for 2 hours. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Oh God, I've been running along with these interviews lately, so I apologize. But you're so fascinating to talk to. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I just have some what I call my quick bites questions, which I ask all my guests, and then I will let you get back to your breakfast. So your favorite meal or snack when in a hurry?
Well, I'm one of these people that can eat cereal at any time of the day. So often,
me too.
if I'm rushing out the door, quick tip some cereal into a bowl, put some almond milk on it, and quickly slice up a banana on it, and I never get sick of that, and that's a good sort of pre or post training meal for me. It seems to always be easy to get down.
Mm-hmm. What about your favorite meal or snack when you're not in a hurry?
If it's a snack, it would definitely be a toast-based meal, like getting some nice bread and toasting it, and then putting some spreads on there with some avocado and tomato and cracked pepper and maybe some capsicum or something. So I think the toaster is probably the next. If I've got a bit more time, I'm sort of heading towards that sort of corner of the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Got it. What's your favorite post-race meal or snack?
Usually, I mean, I'm not that fussy. I mean, I generally wouldn't consider myself a fussy eater, and it depends so much on what country you're in. But almost always post-race is something hot. Often we haven't had any hot food, and so you just feel, I don't know, it's just something about it's obviously temperature based, but it may be because hot food is generally always savoury. But like it can be anything. If it's hot, it just feels amazing. Hot pizza, hot soup, hot chips, hot, whatever it is you can happen to find. There's just something about the having a hot food after a big race is what we go looking for.
What's the most bizarre or exotic food that you've ever tried?
Oh, I've sort of done the usual stuff in the usual countries you'd expect, the frogs' legs and the snails and kangaroo and different things. But there was one race we did in Kazakhstan, which was in sort of Central Asia. It used to be part of Russia. And we came across these goat herders, and they had this pot of soup on a fire, and they gave us some bread and they're giving us some soup, and we couldn't speak the language, but they kind of figured out that we looked hungry, and we could see they were having this quite nice soup, and they asked us if we wanted some more soup. They were trying to trade some cigarettes off us, but we took us a while to kind of explain to them that we didn't have cigarettes with us. But and then when they took the pot off the lid off the pot on their fire, it was a beautiful looking soup, but what was sitting in the middle of the soup was a goat's head.
Oh, God.
I was kind of, maybe just a little bit more. That'll be fine. We'd best get going. Thank you.
Oh, my. What is your favorite beverage?
Oh, it would have to be coffee. That's my drug, I think, that I probably replaced everything else with. So I'm just a very strong black coffee, no additives in it. That's my go-to sort of drink.
What is your comfort food? What reminds you of growing up?
Oh, yeah, I'm not really sure if there's anything particularly. I mean, I think a lot of the seasonal fruits around where I grow up, they remind me a lot of the past, because we'd often go and pick berries in season and different things. So this time of year, when all the seasonal fruits, summer fruits are coming out, that definitely reminds me a lot of sort of growing up in the region, going out and picking berries and getting yelled at by the orchard workers not to eat berries while we're picking them.
I am definitely guilty of doing that whenever I pick berries. What is your favorite sweet or other indulgence?
Favorite sweet, without a doubt, would be ice cream for me. Like, I've got a bit of a weakness for ice cream in the summertime. So
Any favorite flavor?
I think if I was to say one, if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick dark chocolate. I mean, the flavors for me can vary. I'm not that fussy with ice cream, but I think if I had to kind of stick with one, I'd probably go with a nice dark chocolate ice cream.
Awesome. And I think this question is probably going to be the hardest for you of all the guests I've asked, because I have seen your gear shed that you did a little film kind of tour of, and it's practically an entire sporting goods store in there. So this is going to be a tough one. But what are your top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle?
Yeah, it's interesting that when you think about that. for all the things that we do and for all the gear we've got and the different kind of outdoor toys, I honestly think if the government implemented a rule and said, right, from now on, each citizen is only allowed to do one sport and you have to get rid of everything else you've got, the one thing that I would keep in the shed would be my hiking gear. Like, there's something I really love about just traveling in the mountains with everything you need on your back. And that would just be my backpack and my hiking gear. And I think the simplicity of just moving through the countryside, you're carrying your food, you're sourcing your own water, you're cooking on fires, you're sleeping on the ground. Like, I just love that simplicity. And I think out of all the things that I do, all the gadgets and cool stuff that, technology's enabled us with, the one thing that I'd probably treasure the most is just the simple thing of hiking. So definitely hiking gear would be something that I'd consider pretty essential to my life going forward. I think a map is pretty important as well. Like, I have this kind of theory that there's an adventure on every map. So it doesn't really matter what map you've got. There's just untold sort of adventures awaiting within that map, wherever the map is. And so maps, I think, for me are really essential things because they are kind of the passport really to adventure. And then I think the third thing would be, I am a real ocean person, so I would have to keep one of my ocean toys, which would probably be my ocean surf ski, which I mainly paddle. It's the thing I paddle the most.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That is so awesome. And you, of course, you actually partially own a freeze-dried food company, Absolute Wilderness Meals. Are you still involved in that?
Yeah, more so actually. 4 of us started the company, and then earlier this year, two of the partners wanted to get out and go and do other things. So just 2 of us own that company now. And
amazing.
And coincidentally, just this morning, actually, we just officially have finished our kind of planning. So we actually shut the company for a couple of months, just the 2 of us, since we took it over, and have just spent a couple of months just strategizing and figuring out a good way to go forward. And literally just this morning, my business partner sent an email and just said, yep, he agrees with everything that we've got planned. So we're just about to push go again and get it cranked up and happening and get meals out there for the Kiwi summer.
That's awesome. Can you get that stuff in the States, or is it only available in New Zealand?
No, it's only available in New Zealand.
We're
small, so we just supply in the New Zealand market. I do think we have an exportable product though. Like, I think what we're doing is quite unique in the whole world of freeze dry meals, and I think our product would be appreciated by a sector of US outdoors people. But we're still really small in terms of our capacity to produce meals. And the other thing is that exporting food from New Zealand is very difficult as well. New Zealand's very, very fussy about protecting the New Zealand brand. So whatever goes offshore from here branded New Zealand has to be pretty exceptional. And I think we can achieve that, but it's a process that until we're bigger, it doesn't really make any economic sense.
Sure. No, I was just picturing you guys having a little section of REI or something. Like, I don't know if you know REI. It's like a really big good store. Yeah, you know REI. Because they're all like the through hikers, all the people go camping, whatever. And I was watching a little video of like how you rehydrate the food, and you can use it with cold water, and it was like a chili con carne. I'm like, oh, that sounds quite delightful, especially if you have hot water. So I bet there would be a good market for it out here. But anyways, I have taken up so much of your time. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on and talking about pretty much everything and giving me your life story, which I asked for. So I know it was probably more than you signed up for. So thank you.
That's right. It's fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and good luck in God Zone. And I hope that it happens. And if and when Patagonia happens, I really hope to see you out on the show and out on the course.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be there in some shape or form. So yeah, we'll see what happens in that space. But it's a funny world right now. So we'll find out, I guess, as time goes on how things go. So yeah, all the best for your winter over there.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire.
And that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed that one. Again, it was a really long one, but I just could not stop asking him questions. He's so fascinating. He has so much incredible information and advice to share and just experience. It was a real pleasure talking with him. So thank you again, Nathan, for your generous time and for being such an inspiration to us all. Really hoping to see you in Patagonia on the television. Anyways, as always, if you want to get in touch, please do eatforendurance@gmail.com. You can visit my website, hit me up on Instagram, wherever you would like. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you haven't already, please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Spread the word. I want to get this out to everybody who is interested in endurance and nutrition and all this good stuff. Until next time, see you later, guys.